Welcome to another episode of Startup Health Now, the weekly show that is celebrating the healthcare transformers and change makers who are reimagining healthcare. My name is Stephen Krein.
And I'm Unity Stokes.
And on today's episode, we're going to talk to Hesky Kutscher, a serial entrepreneur, now a healthcare transformer, actually one of the original healthcare transformers in Startup Health, about perseverance and what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. This is going to be a great episode.
Stick around.
It is the duty of leaders to lead, of the creative to create, of the daring to do. The free world expects leadership of us. Its fate and our fate depends upon our leadership. We are industrious, inventive, restless, with the fires that burn within us. But I say that nothing is easy, and the best things are the hardest. And all our troubles, all our immense difficulties, now and in the future, can I say, be solved if we have the will, the courage. The future is to those who take it.
Welcome back to Startup Health Now, the weekly show celebrating the healthcare transformers and change makers reimagining healthcare. I'm very excited to spend the next half hour talking to my friend Hesky Kutscher, who not only was one of the original healthcare transformers, but has spent the past 15 years building companies. Two of them have already been sold. He's building his third one called CareDox.
Serial entrepreneur, Hesky Kutscher.
You make me sound old.
No. Esteemed, established.
Esteemed, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Hesky, first of all, thank you for being here. When we were talking about discussing, really what we were going to talk to you about today, the word perseverance kept coming into my head, even though we were going to talk about CareDox and all the great things you're doing there. I think it's one of the most amazing things. I want to go back to the very beginning, right after school. When did you start your first company, and kind of tell us about your journey to entrepreneurship?
So your first comment was unfortunately incorrect. I've not yet gone to school, working on it.
So you are a true entrepreneur from day one.
Yeah, well, I finished the army and worked on my grades, made sure I could...
In Israel?
In Israel. And promised my parents I'd be back to go into it was a dual degree of business and law in Israel. And then got a job offer in Seattle, and I ended up moving to Seattle and kept postponing my schooling. And then got the startup bug and started a company. And crazily enough, raised venture capital.
What year is this?
1999. And so at this point, my parents are starting to give up, and you have to understand this is an academia family.
This was in Seattle.
This is while I was living in Seattle. My parents are in Israel. My mom's a professor. Both grandparents have PhDs. Not a good thing for their son not to get a college degree. But, what choice did they have?
So how did the Army sort of train you, in a sense, to be an entrepreneur, or what was the path that sort of led you to wanting to become an entrepreneur in the first place?
For me, it was kind of a calling. I mean, I had an idea and I wanted to pursue the end. I mean, it was that simplistic in that regard.
Love an entrepreneur's look back it's always like a beautiful story of it was a calling, but what was the calling? Because I think it was called Shop Local, was the first company.
So at that point it was named Daily Shopper, and the grain of Daily Shopper was over a lunch with a friend who actually lives in New York, Ellie Feingold, and he was running a thing called a webmaster type business. I had no idea what that was, and so we started.
I bet people don't even know what that is today, because webmasters.
It was a web development shop,
yeah.
Syncretic Media. I even remember that name. And we once gave each other an assignment. Okay, so we have something to discuss over lunch. You have a minute and a half to come up with a business idea, and that was what started me going on what was then Daily Shopper, which later became Shop Local. And you had the feeling, this is around the time Netscape went public. And now I think that triggered for a lot of entrepreneurs what is about to happen. I was still dialing up on AOL, to go on the internet. And so that was, it really seemed to me, it seemed like a obvious idea. It wasn't obvious to the whole world, although when we launched, we found we had like 8 or 9 competitors. And so, so that was the genesis of what was Shop Local. And we raised venture capital then, and at the time it wasn't abnormal for a 26-year-old without any coding skills to raise money.
How much did you raise?
Raised, the A-Ran was, the first one was my angel ran, $100,000. I mean, a whole lot of money for me. And I had lots
So
of...
how did you feel when you took that first check?
It was you mean, a really close friend and who's invested in everything I've done. He actually wrote the check for me to quit my job. He said, "Get out of your job. You need to do this." And you know, it's a little scary. I don't like owing anybody money. I mean, it's not real when you're 26. Someone's giving you this money and you feel like you're gonna have to pay it back, right? That was, but people were willing to take a gamble on you, and it was pretty amazing. And they were true angels. This is, I think, before, you know, being an angel right now is kind of glorified, and it's, you know, it's a sexy thing to do. At that point, you know, you really had to take chances.
No, in the 90s, even angels weren't in abundance like they are now.
No, and so I really valued those angels, and they got repaid nicely for their for taking a gamble. But one of those true angels helped me get venture capital. I mean, if not for him, I don't know that we would have done the raise as well as we did, and ended up raising a lot more money, almost $12 million. And we had to change models. I mean, we realized after a while that our first realization was that, you know, maybe we were too localized, so we had to go national. Then we realized that the business model, we're a little early on the business model. So at that point, we've already burned through quite a bit of money. We had a big strategic deal that didn't work with Tribune Company, who also made an investment. And then, you know, I don't know if, you know, you guys remember 2001, an implosion comes in, and no one wants to invest any more money in a B2C company. B2C is dead.
So your first couple of lessons in perseverance kind of get, you know, I guess, visibly obvious to you in the building of Shop Local. Even before 9/11, you're struggling with that, but navigating through.
Well, let me just start at a 25-year-old kid who's alone in a town, no college degree, doesn't have really a network. You had to. I did something so incredibly stupid. I called VCs. I was that clueless. I didn't know, and so one of them actually picked up the phone, and he ended up passing me on, you know, try to brush me off. Actually gave me the time of day to have a 10, 15-minute conversation. And then he gave me the name of a guy who I ended up finding and cornering at an MIT Forum meeting, which was the...
MIT Forum.
Do you remember those?
Yeah.
Gosh, man, we're old. And he led me to another person because he wanted to get rid of me. And, you know, but that person, Brian Hilgendorf, was, you know, really my guardian angel in the beginning. He was the CEO of one of Paul Allen's companies, and he really helped me out. But it came out of me doing something incredibly stupid, which is cold call a VC. Who does that? Don't do it. But I did.
Oh, look where it led you.
But it did.
Yeah.
And so that was. But I had to find the person. I had to corner him. I mean, it took all the things you don't want to do. You know, but that's what it takes.
So you launched a company. You raised some angel money. There were, it sounds like, some dark days leading up to 2001. Was there ever a moment with that first company that you thought about quitting? You thought about, wow, this just isn't working. Did you have that? Did you experience that moment, or did you just keep plugging forward? It sounds like.
Well, okay, let's differentiate two things. There's certain things aren't working versus this isn't working.
Right. I
had the conviction from day one that we were on the right path, that I never questioned.
You believed.
I believed. I totally believed, and there were enough people around me who believed, which was the key. But, you know, the road from A to B is not exactly a straight line. And so you got to figure out your path from A to B. And that's what an entrepreneur's role. Very, very, very few companies, very few large companies, by the way, stay the same. Look at IBM, a humongous business, who has gone through some dramatic changes twice, I think, in the last 10, 15 years. And so Hewlett-Packard, I mean, it's not just startups, but most organizations have to change, and sometimes dramatic change, in order to continue to pursue a vision.
So I want to move through because we have a couple of other companies
Yes,
to talk
okay,
about.
sure.
So give us the arc. So Shop Local ends up post 9/11 raising more money because I know you ended up ultimately selling it to
we
joint
bought,
venture. But tell us about that.
Long story short, we actually had to bootstrap the business afterwards. We had no choice. There was no money. Changed the model. Made it into an ASP, which now would be called SaaS,
Right.
and signed up a ton of customers. Actually, our product was really right on the money for brick and mortar retailers for the downturn time, and we grew actually quite fast. Went from 3 customers and a couple of $100,000 to 100 customers and a run rate of $4 or $5 million within a couple of years. And we were and it was great for hiring because everyone is in a downturn and we're hiring, so we
great
got
time.
really good
Yeah.
people, and so it was a good run. And then we ended up merging with our largest competitor, who we were going head to head every time. And a few weeks after that merger, we ended up selling to a large joint venture of some media companies.
All right. So the length of time between start of the company to sale of the company?
5 years.
5 years. Okay. Next company.
High Gear Media.
High Gear Media.
High Gear Media was a network of car buying sites.
And you started this right after
No, I
selling
took
the other
some
one?
time off. I took some time off.
Some
and
recuperation
I went
time.
traveled. Well, not recuperation. You know, my theory amongst serial entrepreneurs who finish one thing and do another is that they're married with kids. You can't take time off. What are you going to do? Stay home and then chase after the kids? I wanted to travel. I wanted to do other things, study, and think what I wanted to do next. You know, I was 32 years old. And, you know, and after a while, I realized that what I enjoy most and what I'm best at is starting internet companies. And so I had another idea I started to pursue, and it was in the automotive space. You know, you have a really good win, so you got a lot more people interested, and Excel and Greylock ended up funding our A round, and I moved from New York to Palo Alto. But that Excel and Greylock is not a recipe for success. End of 2000.
Why?
Well, because you have to build a business. And end of 2007, we started an online automotive company. Anyone remember what happened in 2008? An implosion in the world of automotive. Are you kidding me? I mean, trying to grow a business when traffic to automotive sites has been cut in half, and then all the Google algorithm changes, and then the move to mobile, you're talking about triple, quadruple headwinds. And again,
And it wasn't just automotive. It was like at a certain point, the whole world seemed like it was falling down.
but automotive got it the worst. I mean, do I need to remind you? The CEOs showing up in front of Congress.
Right.
And I mean, you know, so the world of automotive is dead, and we have to figure out a way to grow, because startups who don't grow are dead.
And what were you funded with initially in that company?
So we
The
did a
A-round?
big round, and that ended up, you know, it gave us some time to
All right,
figure
so you
it
have
out.
some capital to figure out
Yeah.
and persevere through some tough times.
But we did. But it took a lot of. I mean, we didn't even know how bad it was 6 months into it, and we trying to understand why what we're doing isn't working.
Did you believe in this new business?
I did believe in it. Although one thing that I was not is the natural customer. I'm not a car guy, and so I was more. I had less of a passion towards automotive. I had passion towards the business. I had passion towards the people, but not as, you know, not as much for the subject matter. And in hindsight, that matters, actually. I mean, you got to be really passionate about, but, you know, it doesn't change that you have to go all out. And, you know, we did a lot of different things to make it work, and, you know, ended up in a successful exit a few years later. But I'm doing a quick jump here.
So what led you to healthcare? Let's shift over to your new company, CareDox, and how you ended up in becoming a healthcare transformer and focusing on health innovation and building a new business in healthcare.
So like most other things, it starts with a pain point that I had and my experience with the healthcare system. And there was this very basic right that all of us have, and that's to know what our medical situation is like, something that most patients actually don't know. Actually, just 2 days ago, I noticed till my dad, who has an eye problem, couldn't even remember the name of the condition. My dad, not a stupid guy. And so, and it really bothered me. It was almost an insult to my intelligence that was in 2010, something along those lines. we still have to deal with uneducated patients who can't access their own health information, they can't share it accurately. And, and there's been some pretty known attempts, Google Health, Microsoft Health Vault, and WebMD, and a lot of people were trying to help people consolidate their health information. And, and I, try to put my own set of glasses on and say, well, this needs to be fixed, that we know. That's not in question. I have conviction around that. Question is, what is the right way to go about doing it? What's the path from A to B? And so my sense was, and I was just becoming a new parent then, and I was becoming acquainted with the concept at which you are right now, Unity, what a bunch of nut jobs we are. And so, and I realized that the one thing that we parents tend to do better than we do for ourselves is care for our own kids. And so if there was a really good place to start, you want to start with an area of caring and passion that you want to tap into so you could grow from. The idea was never just to stay with kids and parents. The idea was just to find a starting point. Much like Facebook started with college kids, right? That was where the passion was. So that was, it was a problem I wanted to solve. Crazily enough, I thought maybe I'd have a chance of solving it, something that some really smart people have tried and haven't managed. By the way, I think when I pitched to First Round Capital, I started the meeting in their office in San Francisco. I said, the streets of San Francisco are filled with the blood of entrepreneurs who have tried what I'm about to do and failed. Because it's true. And
they ended up being one of your initial investors.
I mean, and by the way, huge plug.
I'd love to hear that pitch. Go back in time and hear that very first pitch.
Yeah, well, I will say this. I mean, First Round Capital is an amazing group of human beings. If you ever get lucky enough to be invested, take their money. I don't care if it's in a lower valuation, take it. And I have no incentive to say it except that I really believe that to be true. But that being said, the path started within a certain world, and we were trying to figure out what's the right way to grow. Now, what was then called, the name of the company was always CareDox. Our first product was Mother Knows, and that was a B2C service.
So back up for 1 second. I want to frame what CareDox is.
Sure.
Even day one, because you said it's a company, but your first product is. What do you call CareDox day one?
CareDox is a data and analytics platform. We want to be the bridge that puts together the entire health ecosystem that helps solve their each individual problems by the lack of having connectivity to health data. And I mean patients, providers, organizations such as schools, camps, etc., health brands as well. They also need to improve their own product and need to have access, which they don't have. And it's all because there's a complete disconnected ecosystem right now. So
that's a pretty ambitious goal.
I'd say.
Bringing it down to your first product, what do you bring to market? Mother Knows, and what is that? Because I think that's when we probably met you in the beginning when you were doing that.
Mother Knows was, we felt that much like people wanted to have access to their financial records, like what Mint was doing, we thought that Mother Knows to have your kids' health records online.
Make it super easy.
Super easy. And the super easy was, you sign up online, you give us the name of your doctor. We did have to pay though. And we would then go get all the information on your behalf, digitize it, and it's available to you from a web and an iPhone app. That was the original. And we had our own thesis as to who would be the early adopting parents, and we really thought it would be first-time upscale type parents. They call them helicopter parents or whatever. And that was our thesis. And the thesis was only partially correct. What we learned was, in order to that, for that to work, would require a lot of marketing dollars, because it's not an immediate pain point. They're not waking up in the morning looking, where can I do this? And so then it requires education, and education requires dollars. Medical consumer products, by their own nature, are not viral, typically. So it's not like you could grow in a way that's
People aren't running out to go get their health record, and
No.
it's not the sexiest product.
And so, but what we did see while we're doing this, we were playing around with Google AdWords, that by far the most successful conversion rates, and I mean 6 to 8%, were people looking for their immunization records online.
Right. Yeah.
And why were they looking for the immunization records online? One guess, school. And school was a real forcing mechanism for people to engage with their kids' health. Has been and still is. Why are immunization rates for pediatrics as good as they are versus adolescents? One is required, one is not.
Right.
And school have been put in a role that I don't think they like, quite frankly, but they do it because they're forced into it, which is they're the enforcer of good health in kids. And that's how we got to where we are at CareDox, which is how do we help? We created what we call a care coordination platform, which has several modules. It was a way of collecting data, both from parents and in an automated way from several sources. We can get health information about kids. We have a reporting module. So every school has compliance reports. They have safety reports that they have to create, for the bus driver, for the cafeteria who has allergies. A superintendent told me, by the way, that there's been a rise of 600% in kids requiring, extra attention as it relates to health in the last 9 years. So huge growth there. The management of it is a pain in the backside. And we also create an EMR for the schools to run their infirmary.
So Mother Knows now is a product that's been kind of consumed into the brand, and CareDox is just a platform offering its services to schools, districts. And tell us a little bit your customer
base.
So
both private schools. We have some pretty well-known private schools, Pennington, Seton Hall, and we have some large school districts ranging from Richmond, Virginia to Minnetonka. Baltimore is coming on board now.
So how many schools?
So we have signed up. I don't know the exact last count. It's 300 to 400 schools. I expect us to be. Our ramp up is so fast. We'll be at probably around 2,000 schools by the beginning of the next school year.
So is the business
over 500,000 kids?
Is the business today where you thought it was going to be in 2010? Meaning, is it the same business, or did it sort of ebb and flow to get to this point? So you had this discovery moment, it sounds like, with your father's situation, a personal experience, and then you built this great new business. How has that evolved? Talk about the getting back to perseverance and sort of the process along the way of sort of discovering your company, if you will.
So there was a eureka moment, and there was two parts to it. There was the practical side of it, which was we actually managed to sign up a few thousand paying customers. Not bad. But the bar has been raised. This is now 2011. A few thousand paying customers. Maybe 2 years before that would have actually gotten you an A round. Wouldn't at that point. So now you have a choice. What do you want to do? You could stop or figure out there's something else you want to do. So we decided to go all in and put all our development efforts in this new product and ramp up acquisition through schools, which is, of course, something people tell you is, again, a ridiculously stupid thing to do. Schools have a long sales cycle. They don't have money to spend. By the way,
so a lot of experts were telling you, don't do that.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
And unlike private schools, but again, for me, I'm not looking to build a service business to schools. I'm looking to build a personal health data business. And there's lots of ways of making money in health by helping improve outcomes, because a lot of people care about improving income. The patient itself cares. The people who are helping you, the providers, the health brands, all care about improved outcomes, and all have incentives to improve outcomes. So there's 1,000,001 ways of making money when you have a personal health data platform that helps people improve outcomes. And the schools, they're right, they are in impoverished organizations, but they do a lot of good for kids' health, and I think there's a lot of people who would pay to make that happen, because there's really good incentives to make that happen. So if you look, actually, there's several businesses that were built recently that provided schools something they sorely needed but didn't charge them. And it ranges from companies like Clever to Everfeed to Remind, which I'm an investor in. And so that are growing actually really freaking fast. And
that's what I love about an entrepreneur, where, you know, experts will tell you don't go into a market, don't do a certain thing, even though it's broken. But somehow the entrepreneur perseveres through, figures out a way over time to make it work. And it sounds like you guys are on a really good path now. You've got gone through this customer development process. You figured out who you're selling to. I know you're expanding to several states now.
it will be in 8 states.
Wow.
And what's the experience for the parent now? Because I think it's one of the things that I think you've done and focus a lot on is the consumer experience
Sure.
that people have when they use CareDox platform.
So we try to make it really, really easy for you to provide information to the schools. So
a school enabled with CareDox, because I want to break this down. A school enabled with CareDox platform now no longer asks for people to fax in or email in or send in or or paper in your
it's all
documents.
digital, using one of these, by the way, these are really critical for public schools due to the fact that many kids don't have a computer in their house, and so we've done 2 things to make it easy. Now we've made this. And we've enabled the mobile phones to be data provider. We've also found some automated ways of collecting data, so you don't even have to ask parents, such as immunization data. There's ways of getting that information without even asking them. That's a sea of change, both for the schools and the parents.
And probably brings up a lot of privacy issues and concerns, perhaps, from both parents, schools, and organizations. So how do you deal with the balance there? Because it's once you just said that, now all of a sudden it's what happens.
Well, from day one, we're one of the few companies, I think, in this country who have to adhere to the 2 most stringent privacy laws in the country, both FERPA and HIPAA.
So I think a lot of people know what HIPAA is. Tell us about
HIPAA. I thought you'd say people don't know what FERPA is. But
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say a lot of people know what HIPAA is, not what FERPA
is the laws that protect students' privacy in the school, and it's down to the level of, as an example, you have a kid that has depression. Who within the school is allowed to see that information? It's a tricky situation because does the teacher really need to know? Not so sure. And so how you manage, but the school needs to know. And so how you manage and share that information internally is really tricky. And so we've built a workflow, we've built tools to make that process far easier for the school.
So you're both FERPA and HIPAA.
Both FERPA and
HIPAA compliant. And is that an important accreditation to be able to say you have and you're following?
Critical. I mean, I have 3 kids. My CTO has 4 children. And the last thing I'd ever want is to cause uncomfortableness for any parents because somehow someone hacked into our systems and exposed a health challenge of a child. I mean, I couldn't sleep at night if that happened. And, Ben, our CTO, who's a really talented guy, was building dynamic online forms for banks. They know something about security over there. And so he was a really good fit to help me do this and make sure that we have the Fort Knox of security.
So you had to design privacy and security from day one into everything that you do.
Ingrained into everything we do.
Yeah.
And so shape this with me because, we'll come back to this theme of perseverance because I think it's not talked about enough. Most entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, hear it glamorized. But the realities of it is, through each of these 3 companies, you've had to navigate the daily and weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual ups and downs of an entrepreneur.
Sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah, I always say like 11 o'clock in the morning is the best, and then 4 o'clock is the worst in the same day.
My buddy Yaron Galai, a serial entrepreneur, once said, you gotta love startups. It's you have $1 billion valuation in the morning. You're almost bankrupt. It's not even lunchtime, right. And I think that sums it up pretty well. I mean, I'll give you an example from CareDox. So we made the shift, and I'm now showing up in front of 5 superintendents for a special forum, and I thought we've done this unbelievable new product. It's going to take a lot of waste out of the school system. They'd be crazy not to do it. So I thought. And so I'm showing up in front of these superintendents, by the way, very bright people. inspiring people to me. These are people who could go to the private sector and I believe make much more money. Putting that aside, they listen to what I say and they keep telling me, yeah, okay. No one's here is all that inspired. And you're thinking, oh gosh. And you had to really listen to what they cared about. And what came out of it is giving them liquidity in health data, giving them access to accurate health information is everything. Something they actually don't feel they have. Student safety is really important to them, safety and academic achievement. That's what schools are about, not efficiency. And so we then had to retool our thinking. I showed up again in front of, one of them was the same one, 4 others. Out of the 5, 4 out of the 5 are at some level of adopting the CareDox product. What a difference, right? And it's the product even is somewhat better, but it's not dramatically different.
It was listening.
Listening and understanding not what your pain point is, what is it that they care about. And marketing is important, and it's not just the product, it's how you talk about it, it's how you explain it to them. And so
I suspect that in each of your businesses you were much earlier perhaps than you thought you were when you entered the market. So you got into these ideas.
Because you had this belief, it sounds like, in all of them, where you believed in the idea,
but you had
a passion for it,
and you had to navigate through. And so what possibly, because what keeps you going every day to figure out many people, I think, use the words about like, well, what happens if this doesn't work? What happens if the idea ends up being wrong? And for entrepreneurs, usually it's just, well, we'll figure it out. We'll have to, what are you doing? Because I think, and my guess is you don't even think about how you think about it too much. But clearly, having done this now 3 times and doing it again successfully, I want to dig into what's making you.
Sure. So entrepreneurs can't have pride. And if you don't have pride, then failure is not something you fear. Big deal. I mean, and I think a lot of people...
Say that again.
Entrepreneurs cannot have pride. If you're going to have pride and you're going to try to keep a dignified way about, you find another profession, good luck. But if what I'm saying is indeed true, then failure is not something you fear as an extension of that. Because what you do actually, for you, I would be embarrassed not trying.
So that keeps pushing you forward past the point where most people already would have failed. You keep pushing past that.
Yeah, it's a different way of.
It's a different mindset. It's a different mindset.
It's a completely different mindset. I mean, it's kind of like trying to explain to an artist business concept and trying to make an artist out of me. Not going to happen. I'm just not. Just very different way of looking at things, and you got to respect both, and you need everything.
That should be his next startup. Turning Hesky into an artist.
Yeah, that is actually miracles couldn't do that, But even as I looked back in my 3 companies, I can't talk about entrepreneurship broadly. I look at it myopically. I've always picked spaces, actually, that, to me, it was fait accompli that it was going to happen. Of course, you're going to have local promotions online.
It was inevitable.
It's inevitable. So then the only question, how are you going to get there? And so you need someone who's pretty good at listening and navigating through getting there. To me, the automotive one was a little trickier, only because we were wrong about one notion. We were just dead wrong. To me, at that time, the verticalization of the web in 2008 was a fait accompli, and it kind of is, but it isn't. And certainly media brands weren't as interested in buying, they like bigger properties. And Google likes bigger properties, and Google is the #1 brand in any shopping of anything. So that was something that we were wrong on. So we had to change our expectations and build a business a different way. But certainly, but even High Gear Media built the biggest green car buying website out there, and I think from that there was definitely a grain of truth to what we were doing. CareDox. Of course, Apple's now trying to do this, and it's going to happen.
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
So across, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, across all these businesses that you've built and are building, what strategies do you have for other entrepreneurs that you would recommend to help them navigate the dark days, the tough times, the long cycles, etc. What strategies for perseverance would you recommend, or lessons learned, if you will, to other entrepreneurs?
So I guess there's two questions. One, how do you deal with the dark days?
Sure.
And then the other one is, what are some strategies for entrepreneurs?
Right.
By the way, we'll write these down and tell them back to
Yeah.
you when, you know.
You know, I think let's start with the harder question, with dealing with the dark. I actually think that's the harder one. Everyone, I mean, you need a support system. Or either you need to just have a very strong stamina, which I believe is true, by the way. And it's not for everybody. And you just have to learn to deal with it. You have to learn to bear and grin it and move on.
Related to the support system, personal, professional, talk a little bit about that, because I think
more personal. I mean, I think you just have to get an outlet. One of the things that First Fund Capital talks about is getting a coach. I think that's really important. Get yourself to be a part of an entrepreneurial community who could commiserate with you.
Is that why you joined Startup Health? Or?
Well, a big part of why I joined Startup Health was, you know, I really liked the vision behind putting, you know, you guys accumulated such a high quality group of people. Why wouldn't you want to be a part of it? But, and it's really about the people, right? So everything you do is about the people. So you have to make sure you surround yourself by great people. Great people versus good people is a huge difference, by the way. So if you have greatness around you, you know, turn to them and also find people who've been at your shoes so you could commiserate with. And it's okay to tell them you don't want to hear their advice. You're not asking for advice. Just let it out. It's good. It's helpful.
So peers and coaches to turn to.
Because it's a lonely, you know, it's probably more lonely than people realize, being an entrepreneur.
Unbelievably lonely.
Even when you have a team, when you're the entrepreneur, co-founder starting the company, at the end of the day, it all rests with you, and it is difficult to connect with people.
And the amount of team decisions you need to make on a daily basis is ridiculous. And so it is lonely. I do believe in getting a coach. Get an outlet. You need a good outlet. As far as strategies, I mean, my personal strategy, and this won't work for everybody. I like to meet a lot of people from a specific industry and buy them coffee and learn. That's how, and certainly true in the first two companies I started. It wasn't true in the third one. I've always bought an insider to help me out, because every industry has its own lingo. I think with CareDox, we were still figuring out what lingo we needed to talk.
You still want to bring an insider in?
I think it would be very helpful to bring an insider in. The question is, for which part of the business do we want the insider?
An insider from where? Right.
From where? Yeah. And so, you know, is it going to be a school health nurse? Possibly. I mean, those are, but it's really helpful to have someone who understands. You have to be, I think, incredibly arrogant. I'll take Tesla as an example. Built unbelievably nice cars. When they were hiring at first, they wouldn't take any automotive guys.
Because they wanted new thinking.
New thinking and everything else. Actually didn't work all that well. And the first car actually wasn't the great success that everyone thinks it was. And then they changed and were hiring a bunch of people who are former insiders. Insiders have a lot of value. I think the challenge in a lot of the old companies is the leadership has old thinking. It's not the people that's the problem, it's the leadership behind it.
No, you need to be able to use the history to help inform the future, but not guide the future.
Absolutely.
So
I think the timing of when you do that is important too.
Absolutely. And it's going to vary depending on where you are in your development and what industry you're in. But having insiders who understand it guide you, this notion of it that it takes an outsider to disrupt, I've never been a huge fan. A total outsider without any insider help. I think it's just a mix of both.
So touching for 2 seconds before we wrap up on your angel investing, because I know you also invest a little bit. And look at entrepreneurs. What is your own view of being able to size up an opportunity to angel invest in from your standpoint, and what makes you actually put some money in and help the companies?
First of all, I don't know that I've had some really good bets that worked out really nicely, And I wish I could tell you there's some magic, because actually probably the best bet I made is a product I never used. All the other ones I used actually I really like.
That's a good question. So do you bet on the idea or the company or the entrepreneur running it?
So, okay, so actually I could give a somewhat decent answer for both. In all cases except one, I played around with the product, really liked it, and would have paid for it myself. So that was my litmus test, and they had some growth around it. So that
you were
was
a potential customer.
Yeah, I was a potential customer. I mean, I think if I wasn't going to be a potential customer, me personally, and it doesn't have any growth, and I don't like the entrepreneurs, those are the three things I look for. And so I don't invest in esoteric things or whatever. It doesn't interest me, and I won't be able to assess them all that well. There's one exception to that, which is doing phenomenally well, and it was doing phenomenally well when I invested. And it was two entrepreneurs, the founders of Remind.com, who I really liked the entrepreneurs, but they were growing so fast, and I thought it was a pretty good bet that they're going to continue to grow pretty fast, and they have, and they've raised a lot of money since. But traction stumps all. Ideas are great, but
execution and
execution.
Traction. Yep. Well, first of all, Hesky, continued good luck. I know we enjoy getting to spend time with you at our quarterly summits, and I know you've been not shy about tapping into the network, the peer network at Startup Health. So really exciting. I think you are. I hold you out often as a model for perseverance, because I think that most people, when they look at entrepreneurs or startups, think it's a lot easier than it is. And I think that the fact that you've had 2 successes and are now in your 3rd business, which we know will be successful, I think it is that one characteristic that makes not only you successful, but the entrepreneurs that really figure it out, they are the ones that just persevere through it all, forgetting about everything else, the idea, the other people, just perseverance.
Well, thank you both for your help. You've been part of that network that I had to tap into when things weren't so easy. And I'm sure I'll have to tap into you guys again. So thanks in advance.
Thanks so much, Hesky. Thanks for joining us on the episode of Startup Health Now that focus on perseverance. Please look at all of the episodes in our library at startuphealthnow.com. Startuphealth.com/now. Thank you for listening.
Bye.